Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar on the Humanized Internet, Dignity, Digital Identity and Democracy. I'm Anna Koren from our publishers and will be moderating, and I'm here with the authors and contributors of the book. So before we jump in, like disclaimer, I won't attempt a full introduction of our authors and contributors because they've all done way too much for me to fit into a few lines, and because I'd rather hear from them. So that said, I'll give a quick overview, and if anyone feels like I've missed something essential, please feel free to jump in and set the record straight. So Monique is a global tech leader with over 25 years of experience in emerging technologies, cybersecurity, and innovation. She currently holds several advisory roles and is also president and co-founder of the Humanized Internet, a nonprofit advocating for digital identity as a fundamental right. And Akram is also a co-founder of the Humanized Internet and co-author of the book. Front-end developer by background, Akram has conducted research and led coding bootcamps for refugees across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. He also co-authored the UNESCO report, the Room 7 Playbook, IT Education for Refugees, and brings a unique perspective on digital inclusion and identity from the ground up. Dr. Mehran Zarabini is a tech entrepreneur and sustainability advocate with over 20 years of leadership experience. And as the founder and CEO of Woohoo Plus, he focuses on driving circular economy innovation by connecting green entrepreneurs, investors, and consumers through decentralized technologies. And Aditya Pradeep is the CEO and co-founder of Jeev, a platform supporting project developers in launching and scaling equitable nature restoration initiatives with a strong background in digital identity and product strategy. He previously led the rollout of identity solution at Percivis, contributing to major EU digital identity deployments. So welcome everyone. And I guess now to the book itself. At its core, I guess the Humanized Internet explores the critical intersections between identity, emerging tech, and human rights. So it asks the questions: who controls our data? What does digital self-sovereignty mean in the age of AI? How do we reclaim the internet as a force for empowerment and not exclusion? So I guess I would like to invite all of the contributors. And to begin, when you talk about the humanized internet, what does that actually mean to each of you? Is it a vision, a framework, or something we're already building piece by piece?
So I'll go ahead and lead off. I think, as probably stated multiple times, it is to bring, with all of these emerging technologies, humanity in the loop, the human in the loop, especially with emerging technologies. And one of the issues that we have to be very, very careful of is this, what I'll call a polarity between companies that want to, organizations that want to actually have quick revenue and those that, and then of course, what are the ethical boundaries? I think that's most important aspect that we need to care about, especially when we're talking about artificial intelligence and generative AI and so on, as the technologies are moving quite quickly. So that would be one aspect of it. So is it a vision? Is it a framework? It's both. It's actually quite both.
Absolutely, Monique. If I make it very simple, like what that looks like to me in a perfect world is like humanized internet is, as Monique said, like has the human interest in its center, right? So yeah, I mean, of course, this is a very general thing to say, but is to shift away from having internet as a medium to control, as a medium to sell data, and move away to actually leverage the technology, leverage all the technology, like upcoming technologies like AI and blockchain, to to focus first on helping people or helping solving problems.
Yeah, I think Anna, for me, it's really when we look at the humanized internet and e-sovereignty, I think it's fundamentally about reclaiming agency in really in the digital realm, and I think it's more about having or enabling us to have more granular control over the use of our data, certainly from an exchange and value perspective. And this is where I think kind of tokenization plays a very critical role, being able to transform personal data in discrete units of value that we can control and monetize should we wish to be able to do so.
Yeah, and I think echoing everyone's thoughts, I think the humanized internet is about unlocking the potential of the internet for everyone, right? We're talking about a technology that is just remarkable in the value that it's generated over the last few decades, but clearly the benefits of it has been accruing to a few. And for me, the humanized internet is about rethinking the paradigms and the sort of social structures underlying the internet which can unlock that potential for everybody. So yeah, and then I think having sort of stepped out of the digital identity world for the last couple of years, I think I sort of see this as a broader issue of basically sort of rethinking, I guess, allocation and distribution of the value generated by the internet. And I think that sort of ties into some of the kind of structures that drive innovation. I mean, a venture-backed startup or a private company or a company which is sort of motivated by maximizing profit has an inherent conflict with sort of the distributional potential of what the internet can drive. And I think we don't have answers to that yet, but that's what this discussion is about for me.
Mm-hmm. So I guess maybe a bit on the concept of a digital citizen, which is central to the discussion of self-tokenization and data democratization. How do you define a digital citizenship in the context of decentralization? What responsibilities and rights should come with being a digital citizen? How can we ensure that the balance between privacy control and data usage is maintained?
So, digital citizenship, that's a multimodal question, and of course, you're talking also about self-tokenization, which Meron can lead off on. So, one of the aspects we have, and again, it's a big polarity, is how do we think about having an apostille seal that is digital that we can trust, right? We do, and by the way, given to us by a sovereign entity. Let's say a government or an organization or whatever. It's a very, very difficult problem to solve. And we've also talked about, sort of this sealed lockbox that you could have that would be yours and only yours ultimately. So digital identity has to come hand in hand with, you have these sort of paper identities or sets of identities. And so we have, my point is, and the point that we make in the book is that we will have multiple identities. And so whether they are things, whether they are an internet of things, where they are specific to us, these multiple identities will exist. But a digital identity that is sovereign is still an opportunity to solve, and we're not quite there yet. Meron.
That's right, and like you mentioned, I think we take on these multiple kind of identity sets where we kind of embody multiple roles. I mean, we can be a consumer, we can be a patient, we can be a worker, we can take on all these different kinds of different identities, but each has its own kind of data set associated with it, behavior, and even from a value flow perspective, they're unique in every way. And I think this is where self-sovereign identity, or even the ability for tokenization, we can actually compartmentalize and selectively kind of disclose facets of identity and having our own personal agency over what is being able or allowed to be shared with whom and for what kind of purpose.
One aspect I wanted to say is that is there part of the discussion is privacy. And privacy is going to be very, very, some organizations will say privacy is dead. But I would argue the opposite. You can opt in. You have to understand what it means to opt in or opt out. And so when we look at the meeting that we're having today, it says this meeting is being recorded, and there's some privacy issues that we have to pay attention to, because it's what entities are collecting these privacy and for what purpose, and we have to understand that as a question or be able to pose it.
So how do we balance the privacy and human rights and also efficiency, right?
Oh, that's multimodal again. I mean, because privacy, human rights, and trust, I think, is what you're looking at. So, you have to understand what is the definition of human rights, and what are countries aligned with what how we define human rights, right? As right for the human. And so I think these are, as we see in geopolitics, these are questions that are being asked, right? And what we see it from the United Nations perspective and so on. Trust is trust. The other issue is around trust is what filter bubble do we exist in? How do we define trust, especially when we're talking about deep fakes? How do we control that? What does that mean? I mean, that's about the genie out of the bottle, and how these technologies are being used and misused, and and where we go with digital justice. But those are big discussion points that we can certainly that are discussed or highlighted in the book. but they're very, very tough problems, but can create opportunities.
Yeah, I can say a few points about here. It's like, okay, trust is the ultimate problem. I think, internet or not, it's about how my data or all our data is being processed. That also like set the tone about trust, right? Like if I know it's like my data is over analyzed, over collected with my or without my knowledge, and is being used not to solve a problem, not to be efficient, not to give services for people, but actually to just gain control. And I chose gain control because it's not only a company trying to monetize this information. It's also governments, right? Like not also like of course governments are still like the central authorities that will issue identities. That's not a bad statement. It's reality, right? But I mean, we see it, and we've seen it. We still see it. Like this is not always a great model. Like sometimes there's untrustworthy governments will choose to use that system as a weapon to control their citizen, their movement, their rights. There's not going to be a time when it's going to be a total private internet. Like everyone is totally anonymous. Like you don't know anything about any information about any user or anybody on that network. It's also about how to, maybe it's going to be a journey, but how to shift the way that trust also needs to be enabled by the system itself. The system will not let anybody to control or abuse the information or identities on the network.
Yeah, and the world order as we know it is being challenged, and so we just have to be very, very cognizant of that.
So speaking about the growing trust, right? Trust deficit in centralized systems, from governments to private enterprises, as you said, and I guess we can also debate on how you define trust. But will blockchain and decentralized technologies applications serve as a foundation for a new social contract? How do you foresee trust being reestablished in these systems?
Yeah, I think certainly blockchain presents a huge opportunity in order to overcome these issues of trust. Obviously, distributed ledger technology, tamper resistant, transparent, auditable, and so forth. These are the kinds of major things with respect to blockchain. But I mean, if you look at some of the research that we've done, we actually took it away from not only just individuals, but we started to look at institutions, and in particular, we had to look at industries. One of the particular industries either was healthcare, which we know that there's a lot of very good research out there and very good use cases with respect to blockchain and implementation of blockchain, especially when it comes to the use of data and sharing of data and being able to be in control of data. But we even had to look at different kinds of industries, such as the waste management industries, which we've seen very recently. And I think this is why the book is so fantastic and that it's been launched now, is we have huge issues at the moment. There was a very interesting public case in the United Kingdom where you have governments which issues various kinds of permits to entities for the export of waste material from one country to the other. In this particular case, it was moving material from the United Kingdom to India, which we know is the world's biggest consumer of waste material. And in particular, we were dealing with tires. All the permits and everything were in place to facilitate these kinds of transactions, but there were some very clever citizens out there, advocates, who actually took the British government to court. They actually placed GPS tracking devices within the waste tire material, and they actually found out that this kind of material were actually going into illegal entities on the Indian continent, which contributed to the deaths of quite a number of people in those particular areas where the material had been shipped to. And it just shows you that these are all very siloed entities. Information is not being shared with one another at all yet. I think some of the work that we proposed in the chapter was, if this kind of this whole kind of supply chain could actually be utilizing blockchain technology to ensure that with such multiple stakeholder involvement. Transparency would be one of the key solutions to understand how material flows from one place to the other, but also allowing regulators and legislators to actually have access to certain parts of the information and anybody else from a stakeholder perspective. And one would be able to ensure that the correct material ended up in the right place and being used for the correct purpose. Because currently it's just a complete and utter failure. And this is just one example.
Yeah, this is a great example pointed out also in the chapter, as you've well articulated, Mehran. I think, Aditya, you may also have a perspective from your angle here. You know, we all, by the way, we all met one another talking about blockchain, you know, in the early days. So, I mean, it's a great question to ask about the role of these technologies, especially blockchain, around, you know, how do we get to what does truth look like, and so on. So we'll go to you, Aditya.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of what the blockchain can enable, particularly in the realm of identity, privacy, and trust, is the ability to decouple ability to verify the identity of a person or any other type of entity from a centralized database, right? The risk from using a single identity, a single identifier across the internet is that certain centralized entities can construct extremely holistic profiles of who you are, every service you're interacting with, everything you're using, which in itself is maybe not a problem, but is something, if this data ends up in the wrong hands, can very easily be weaponized. So I guess what the blockchain enables is to decouple the need for relying on centralized databases from the sort of need to verify yourself to access certain services. And that's sort of where the realm of self-sovereign identity comes in, right? It's basically exactly what that enables. It gives you as a user the ability to control who has access to your data, what they see, and also interact across services without using one sort of persistent identifier, which can allow you to be tracked across everything that you use. So yeah, that's, I think, where blockchain can help in the realm of identity and preserving privacy and trust.
And I know you've mentioned like Estonia and India are presenting successful but distinct models in the book for national digital identity. Can you tell us like what lessons should we take from these examples and speak a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I come from India myself, and the reason I got excited about this topic is the fact that India launched its own digital identity program back in 2009. So it was really a pioneer in the realm of digital identity alongside countries like Estonia, who sort of got into the space a bit earlier. And in India, what happened was, on one hand, Aadhaar, as the digital identity system is called, was a massive driver of financial inclusion. It meant people who never had identities before for the first time could have a phone number, a bank account, and through the bank accounts, direct transfers of subsidies into the bank accounts of these unique people, which in the past was abused, and there was a lot of leakages in the subsidy system in the past, right? So on the one hand, it was a massive driver of social inclusion. It was a massive driver of bringing people onto the internet. But on the other hand, the fact that everything was tied to your biometric data, this biometric data was stored in a centralized government database, and every time you were to access basic services, this data would flow back into that database, right? So that's sort of what got me interested in the space, and kind of ties back to what I said about blockchain and self-sovereign identity, enabling all of those things that we just spoke about, which is very desirable, while taking away the risk of building these extremely centralized profiles of people, which rest in a single place. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of experiences, and I think there's a number of governmental initiatives which have emerged since then, definitely in the EU, sort of leading the way with the new sort of iteration of what they call eIDAS, and launching sort of like a cross-continental digital identity program, which will allow every European resident and citizen the right to a self-sovereign digital identity in the coming years. We're seeing similar initiatives, definitely with Switzerland following the lead of the EU as well. So the hope is that we will eventually get to a point where everybody around the world can have access to these identity systems, credential wallets, which can allow you to manage your identity, but also other credentials, which allow you to interact with services in a privacy-preserving way.
Thanks. I would also cover like if maybe topic of artificial intelligence, like if we open this modern day Pandora's box, unleashing capabilities we may not fully understand or control, I guess was said in the book. What does it mean to build like ethical machines? How do you see it? How can we ensure ethical principles like fairness, accountability, and respect for human dignity are not just layered onto machines as an afterthought, but are embedded from the design?
So, artificial intelligence, when we look at it, is over 80 years old. So it's not something new. It's just how it's being turned as a tool, and ultimately as something that's revenue generating for some organizations. So when we're talking about ethics, as we say in the book, is contextual. And first and foremost, I just want to say how grateful I am with some of our contributors here, like Aditya and Meron being here, as well as I can't say enough about Akram, who is really key and core to the story as a co-author. But it's contextual, because ethics can be defined that it's social, it's also cultural. And you also have sort of a technology component of it. And so when we speak about ethics and so-called ethical machines, what we're referring to actually is what the red lines are. When a technology has been developed for implementation, can we articulate what the safety boundaries are? If you go over a safety boundary, of course, we may not know all of it, but what would that mean? What are the dangers? Just as I always personally make the analogy, it's just as you have a pack of cigarettes, one could say it could cause cancer if you smoke it. These are the sort of the basics, right? And it's more pertinent now than ever before, because ethical machines is also correlated with what we call the humanized internet, having the human in the loop. Having the human in the loop, I mean, we develop these technologies, right? We as humans develop it. And so if we put the human outside the loop, then we have to look at, what could be the possible safety issues that we have to pay attention to. So that's what I would say at a macro level, what is meant by ethical and ethical machines.
Yeah, I guess if I can jump in, perhaps I'll try and again bring it back to identity, because that's sort of the realm I came from. I mean, I think, again, like Monique said, it's sort of and also what we've learned from like the past experiences, for example, with GDPR, the European Data Protection Regulation, and so on. When it comes to protecting the rights of citizens and privacy in the age of AI, it kind of ties back again to similar principles, right? The right to be forgotten, the right to opt out from having all of the data you input into, say, ChatGPT to be used for model training, the right to sort of have your data be anonymized before it is used for sort of model training, if it is so done, right? I guess the challenge comes with using a lot of these services. You really don't have the option to opt out, or you don't quite know very clearly what you're opting into when you pour your life out into that text box there, right? So I think it's really about, I guess, again, goes back to themes that were touched upon before, providing people interacting with AI the opportunity to have agency and control, and know exactly what you're signing up to when you're putting your information out there on the internet.
It's well said. I think the agency and control is very, very key to the topic. And especially when you look at these, when you're looking at not knowing what you're opting in or opting out, remember that these documents are written by lawyers. And they're very, very, sometimes folks don't understand them. They just want the service, but they want the service that there's going to be a cost to it. So we have to pay attention to what that is.
And also that should put more responsibility on technology provider and companies. yes, like not all the users gonna read the terms and conditions. It's like what, like dozens of pages sometimes, and like a lot of, as you say, Monique, a lot of legal and technical solution. Somebody who's like maybe 15 years old just wants to get his or her Gilby style photo selfie for the Instagram account. They don't really know what's the, all the AI engines doing, what's the data being collected, and so on. So would I blame the end user to this, or would just like I put more responsibility on tech provider? Because let's face it, everyone knows, especially the lawyers, people not gonna do that, not gonna read that. And if they did, they just maybe don't care. I mean, they want the nice little service at the end, right?
I think that's one of the problems, because often people want instant gratification or instant answers, and that's why they use these kinds of services. So these companies often put the opt-in, opt-out at the very beginning of the conversation as you're logging on, and I think the 99.9% of people will just override it in order to be able to get those instant answers. So I think maybe these companies maybe strategically put it there, but I think one has to be very careful going forward in how that information and how that data is actually being utilized elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think as we currently operate, it's sort of like opt into all of these services by default, right? And I think we need to move to a realm where it's privacy by default. And if you actually want to say, hey, you know what, OpenAI, go ahead and use my data, then I actively tick a checkbox or flick a switch to say, I'm giving you the permission, right? And I think that's probably where regulation can step in. And it's sort of a pretty simple principle saying, look, all of the services out there on the internet need to be sort of privacy by default. And if you as a citizen are open to sharing your data, go ahead and actively make that choice, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think privacy by default is excellent recommendation. It's as the old adage goes, I mean, you are the product, right? And so, and until something, when you have, until something negative happens to you, people don't care. But then there is, having been involved in working with the World Economic Forum on this whole notion of the pathway to digital justice and identity. People care deeply when your identity is stolen and perhaps put on pornographic sites. Then it becomes another issue. It's tangential to the discussion, but that's the issue we're dealing with when we're talking about these types of technologies. And I go back to the use of these technologies to generate deep fakes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to add to this is like most of the times I have these discussions with people, and like they think about like their privacy problems or the lack of trust is like when such an incident happened. Like usually or often I get the answer, yeah, like but like nothing happens to me or happened to me or anybody I know. No one stole my bank ID yet. No one stole my image yet. I mean, it could not happen, right? But it's not only the individual incidents, right? The internet's getting more powerful, and like now we're AI joining the party. God knows what the potential is gonna be in the future. So it's not only about the individual incidents. It's also about like the crowd control. We've seen internet being used to have influences on election results. Sometimes could be in the media. I mean, just take a tour on any social media platform about like maybe a topic that you really know about, right? Like let's say you're living in a country X and they're covering some topic about that country. Something is just happening now, and you know much about it, and just go take a tour there and look into like the mainstream media or like what people tweeting or like posting, not to mention a platform name, right? And like I would bet that often you would see like decoupling of what reality that you actually know and what you see, what kind of information you see online. And at some point you get the conclusion is, okay, well, I think this is how media works, like all before the internet as well. But it's just now is being used differently, like in a stronger way to control the crowd, to control the public opinion. And just imagine with all the information you know about, let's say, a community, like with all the data, with all like what they feel like, what they order online, what they read, news they read. This is a super weapon. We all opt in. Just like say, okay, we're fine. We agree to use that. I mean, I think none of us agree, but like this is the current situation. Yeah, and again, I would of course would like to raise awareness for all the individuals to know more about those facts, but like it should also come from up down. It's not only bottom up. It should companies, governments, tech provider needs to have more responsibility toward that, like the current system.
You know, an example of the use of these technologies, for example, particularly with generative AIs, you know, the whole idea of having your own personal AI assistant, but which entity is providing that and for what purpose? I think that's the things these are the questions we have to ask. And when you look at folks who have very, very key scientists who've expressed concern about the misuse of these technologies, they know that how these technologies can be misused. Actually, what I would say is, you know, impinge upon your own privacy, your own humanity. And so I think this is awareness, and a webinar like this and the book is a step toward this awareness, is toward asking these questions. And one other point I want to make with regard to regulators. Self-regulation, we know, doesn't work. It just doesn't. And I think most of the companies are asking to help them regulate, right? Regulation we don't have to over-rotate on regulation just to actually impinge also on innovation, but we have to make sure that we have a middle way, that we're working together and we take regulators along that journey together.
I think, yeah, that we should be finishing up in a couple of minutes. So just to close off, like building a humanized internet is not a choice, but a moral imperative. So as we wrap up, I'd like to invite all of the contributors to share any closing thoughts or takeaways from the discussion. Anything you'd like to leave us with?
I think just the launch of this book, I think it couldn't have come any sooner. I haven't had the opportunity to read it yet. I'm also looking forward to physically buying the hard copy. I'm a little bit old school, rather than reading through the PDF, but I think there's just so much pertinent information in there that is so useful for today. And I think, you know, even some of the work that I was involved with, Monique, you know, even though we started on it a couple of years ago, but you just see how important it is in this day and age. So I could just, you know, encourage everybody really to read it. I just think it's so critical at this particular point in time. And I think, you know, with the things such as the geopolitical situations occurring around the world, and we see how governments react and governments behave, I think there's just not more an important time to actually control our own data from an individual perspective going forward. I just think it's so important.
Yeah, to jump in there, I think, like Mehran said, I guess the news is full of pessimism and doom, but I think the book addresses and provides concrete examples as to how some of these issues can be addressed. So there is definitely a pathway to a more optimistic future, to a future where this technology can be used to the benefit of everybody. And yeah, and I mean, I look forward to that future, and I think we're all playing our own little parts in making that happen. So yeah.
Well, I have you to thank for the idea of the book. Of course, all the contributors, thank you so much. Really excited for the launch of the book. It's been a long journey. I'm gonna admit at some points, at some time, that I felt like, okay, this may not gonna happen. It might not see the light, but here we are, very close to launch the book. Just wanna note that I have just some small it's not a regret, but something I wish it was different. When we started writing the book, I think it was 2018, 2017, Monique, or at least the birth of the idea was like 2017, right? And I tried to give my insight, my personal story as much as possible in my chapter. That was before the fall of the Assad regime. Without talking so much about it, it's an evil one, right? So not to go into political discussion. And when I was finalizing the chapter, I was always trying to be careful. I was like always on the line between I don't want to endanger anybody. I was already outside, I was already in Germany, living in Germany, so I'm relatively safe. But like all my family, my friends, even my neighborhood would be in danger if I spoke my mind. Thankfully, the Assad regime fell like in last December. I really wanted to be sooner for of course many reasons, but also wanted to give more information about the chapter. The chapter is still like it's in the original state, so I did not update it because there was not enough time. But yeah, that has been and still the focus, like people who are suffering from the misuse of identities in general. And I think also the focus was when I started discussion with Monique is about also refugees. There's like hundreds of millions of people currently. The numbers are scary actually. They don't have any services. They don't have any identification. They don't belong to any identification system. They're just unseen. They're just invisible. That's still the focus. We don't claim that we have all the answers in the book. I don't think. I think it's a journey like for all humanity to figure this out. We're still in the early steps, but this book is an invitation to think, to educate, and to maybe take the first few small steps.
So thank you so much to the contributors here. Really, we're so grateful. And to Akram, one point I want to make is Akram made the story personal. I think making a story personal or the narrative personal actually takes away from what could be hypothetical or theoretical discussions, although we all made that attempt to actually look at concrete, how things are concrete. And, anybody, the point I always make, the point we all together want to make is, you wake up one morning and something happens. What do you take with you? Whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a fire, look at the fires in Los Angeles, for example, whether it's a regime change or whatever, what is the things that you take with you? And when I visit the refugee camp in Zatari, many of the people said they took their diplomas with them. They took their certificates with them so that they could prove that they were doctors or whatever. So that's one aspect of it. But as we conclude, we're very excited that this book, although a long project, but it's more pertinent now than any time before. It's been a journey, and we're very grateful to you, River Publishers, to be flexible with us and take us along this journey together. The future doesn't have to be dystopian. There's wonderful uses of these technologies. Specifically, if we talk about, Meron, we were talking about sort of smart medicine and how to use that, for example. There's wonderful uses that as long as we are cognizant of the misuses, we can also look at what the wonderful uses are. And so with that, we're excited about the launch of this book, and we're excited about it taking it to the next level. So thank you so very much.
So everyone else, absolutely check out the book. I've read it myself and it's fantastic. I'll drop the link to pre-order it below, and it will be available in May.
Thank you. Such a pleasure working together on this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.